Welcome to a Legendarium special about Michael Scott, Wizard of the Scottish Border. In this episode, we will learn about a scholar of such great reputation that men came to believe him a wizard. Michael Scott is believed to have been born in Fife on the Scottish border with England during the year 1175. He likely came from the French-speaking aristocracy of Scotland, which made it easy for Scott to study abroad. He learned mathematics, philosophy, and theology at Oxford University and then the University of Paris. In Scott's time, graduates often went on tours to other centers of learning in an early form of advanced studies. After arriving in Toledo in Muslim-ruled Spain during the first decade of the 13th century, Scott gained a strong knowledge of the Arabic language. He then translated the works of the Greek philosopher Aristotle from Arabic into Latin. The translation, lost to Western Christendom for centuries, found its way to Oxford and other medieval universities. Scott then went to Sicily and became known in papal circles. He served both Honorius III and Gregory IX. One of the popes offered Scott a non-resident church living in Cashel within Ireland. Scott declined on the basis that he did not speak the local language, though he likely knew that the Irish clergy would probably resent him. Nonetheless, by traveling across Europe, Scott built up a knowledge of many languages and became a skilled translator. After coming into contact with Muslim culture in Sicily, Scott began to dress in Arab clothes and developed a passion for Arabic and Eastern literature. This is likely what led people of Scott's time to believe he had become a sorcerer. Along with mathematics and medicine, Scott had a deep interest in the occult, alchemy, astrology, and sorcery, all considered serious sciences in his time. Scott also had a reputation for being vain about his work and proudly proclaimed that he had witnessed the transformation of copper into silver. No word on if he ever replicated this or not. However, his alchemical works show that Scott carried out many experiments with Jewish and Muslim alchemists during his travels. He recorded elaborate and strange recipes, including one for making gold that calls for the blood of a ruddy man and the blood of a red owl, to be mixed with saffron, alum, urine, and cucumber juice. No word on if this concoction made gold or not. Scott's reputation for prophecy using the stars led to him being headhunted by Frederick II, Holy Roman Emperor, to be court astrologer. During his time in Frederick's court, Scott predicted the outcome of a war between the Empire and the Lombard League of Northern Italy by his astronomical observations. Scott even predicted that the emperor would die in the city of Florence, so the emperor avoided the city like the plague. Of course, the emperor, at least according to legend, wound up dying in a town known as Little Florence. Yet on one occasion, the emperor asked Scott to measure the distance between the top of a church tower and heaven, a task that Scott duly accomplished. The emperor then secretly removed a few inches from the top of the tower and asked for another measurement. Michael deduced the emperor's trick and commented that either heaven had drawn further away from the earth or somehow the tower grew smaller. Even in his own time, Scott became the subject of tall tales, much like his talented and unorthodox contemporary Roger Bacon. According to these tall tales, Scott commanded a retinue of familiars that he sent to raid the kitchens of the Pope and then send their food back to him by the wind. Supposedly, Scott also rode through the sky on a demonic horse, or sailed the seas in a demonic ship, or even rode on the back of some fantastical sea beast. Tale-tellers even claimed that he could make the bells of Notre Dame ring with a wave of his magic wand. Scott's abilities also supposedly enabled him to foresee his own death, which he believed would be caused by a small pebble falling on his head. As a precaution, Scott always wore an iron cap. However, according to border legends, Scott took off his hat when taking Mass in Melrose, and as predicted, a small pebble fell on his head, and soon afterwards Scott became ill and finally died in the year 1235. A famous and infamous man in his time, the tales associated with Scott became more colorful with the passage of time. Dante, when describing the 8th circle of hell in his Divine Comedy, placed Scott there. The 8th circle is reserved for counselors of fraud who brought about the downfall of others, and in Dante's poetry, Scott wanders a giant pit while wreathed in flame. Back on Earth, Scott's acts of wizardry, real or imagined, grew in the telling. His most famous acts include using his staff to change the course of the Tweed River and splitting the Eldon Hills into the 3 peaks seen today above the town of Melrose. Sir Walter Scott wrote that Michael cleft the Eldon Hills in 3 and bridled the River Tweed with a curb of stone. Of course, Sir Walter Scott wrote this nearly 600 years after Scott's death, so it is doubtful that things unfolded in this way. Yet it does show the enduring power of the scholar, with talent so great that his fellow men came to believe him a wizard. Writing several hundred years later, Walter Scott also said that Michael Scott's mourners buried him with magical books near a cross in Melrose Abbey. Of course, it is unknown whether Michael Scott even died in Scotland, but by then his reputation grew so great that many Scots preferred to believe that he had indeed come home before his death. That wraps things up for this episode of the Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.